What's up, guys? Welcome back to Will of DDT. My name is Anonymous, and today we're going to be going over another deck profile. Today we are bringing you our Issho deck profile. This is a super cool leader, and this is a color combination that I have been waiting for since set 1, man. I've been wanting a black-green leader for so long. We finally got it. Unfortunately, he is kind of overshadowed by the other leaders that came out alongside him, but this is a super interesting deck. I feel like it's one deck where there's not a lot of builds online yet, and so I was really interested in making this, and yeah, I hope you guys can enjoy this deck as well. Since he is a lesser known leader, let's go over the ability. So right there, Dawn times 1. During your turn, you can give all of your opponent's characters -1 cost. This is just kind of a bonus ability, but it definitely comes up, and I will talk about some of the characters that can take advantage of this later in the video. And then at the end of your turn, you can spend 1 Dawn to set one of your characters with a cost of 5 or less as active. So essentially, if you have a character who's rested, as long as it's 5 or less, you can spend 1 Dawn at the end of the turn to restand it. Your opponent won't be able to attack it next turn. So this is really cool because it allows us to attack with blockers, and just generally it allows us to attack with units and then keep those units safe so that your opponent's swings have to be routed to life instead of characters. So that's a really cool ability, and basically we've built the deck around that ability. So without further ado, guys, let's get started. Alright, guys, just some starting words before I jump right into the deck profile. Again, Issho is a leader where I think it's not really clear what you're supposed to run. Unlike Rebecca or Dofi, who have very set builds, this is a leader who's kind of like a blank template. Really is just whatever you want to try to do with him. So I think there's still a lot of experimentation going on with this leader. I personally have found this build and I've settled on it and I like it a lot. But yeah, just a word in advance. Some people want to run Wano, some people want Supernovas, other people want Navy. I ended up deciding that the Navy package was the best for this deck. And so to start us off, we're running 4 copies of Brand New. Brand New is going to be able to search all of our Navy cards. Generally, in my opinion, with these searchers who only hit the top 3 of the deck, you want to run at least 30 copies of cards that are searchable off of them. So I have 31, I think, Navy cards in this deck that can be searched by Brand New. And so we're kind of committing to that build. And generally, this deck likes to go second, so it's also just important to have something to play on turn 1. On turn 1, you've got your 2 Dawn, you can drop Brand New, or you can drop Rosinante. We are running 4 copies of the 2-cost blocker Rosinante. Trust me, a lot of people have asked, why not Fukuro? Why not Barto? Those are both 3-cost blockers, but they have added benefits. Barto has a 2k counter, Fukuro can't be killed by effects, but trust me, the cost difference really does matter in this deck. In this deck, there's a lot of times where we're gonna pump out a ton of attacks, and then we just want some Dawn left over at the end of the turn to drop a small blocker. And that 1 Dawn difference really makes a huge deal. There's plenty of times where I was very happy I'm playing Rosinante and not Fukuro or Barto. So yeah, personally, I think he earns a spot in the deck, and he's searchable off of Brand New, most importantly, whereas those other 2 blockers are not. And him costing 2 allows us to play him on turn 1 if we're going second. So yeah, that's very important, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Next up, we are running 4 copies of Kobe. Kobe's just an awesome card, man. A Navy staple, 3 cost, KO at 3 cost. And with the leader ability, where 1 Dawn underneath Issho minuses the entire, your opponent's entire board by 1, Kobe can actually kill a 4 cost. So that's really relevant in this meta. We have a lot of 4 costs. We have blocker Uta, blocker Sanji, Whitebeard's still out there running vanillas. Rebecca has the Orlumbus. There's lots of key 4 costs in the game that we want to be able to kill. Kobe's going to be able to do that with a Dawn underneath the leader. Obviously, you do have to discard, but there's a few pretty clear discard targets in this deck. Next up, we are running 4 copies of Borsellino. This is just standard fare, man. If you've got a Navy searcher and you're playing a deck that can restand blockers, Borsellino is just such a clear pick. This guy can attack for 5k, and then your leader can restand him, and he's a 6k blocker on the opponent's turn. And again, on opponent's turn, can't be KO'd by effects. That's just fantastic. 4 copies of Borsellino, nothing really surprising there. Next up, we're going to be running 4 copies of the starter deck X-Drake. I think ever since Issho was announced, this was the one obvious synergy that everybody spotted. X-Drake with 1 Dawn on him gives all your Supernova and Navy leaders and characters an extra 1k. It doesn't sound like much, but if you get this guy on board, it can be absolutely oppressive. It is crazy getting an extra 1k just for attaching a Dawn underneath X-Drake. He does need to be rested, so you have to attack with him first, but this guy pretty much buffs every single unit in the deck. Kobe can attack without a Dawn, which feels amazing. Him being a 4k was probably the most annoying thing about him, so now he's effectively 5k if there's an X-Drake on the board, and all your other units are going to be able to swing for an extra 1k. Even brand new, you put 1 Dawn underneath him and suddenly he can swing at life. So this is a really, really good card in this deck. Don't underestimate the value of that extra 1k on all of your attackers. And your leader gets it as well, which is awesome. Next up, we are running the 5-cost X-Drake. This is also a Navy type character, just like the 4-cost, so they can be searched by brand new. And this card on play kills one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 4 or less. Again, your leader makes it so that when you play this guy, you can actually kill an opponent's rested 5 or less character. That is super, super fantastic. There are, again, a lot of relevant 5 costs in the game, and being able to put a Dawn underneath leader and then play X-Drake to just KO a 5 cost feels amazing. This is a really useful card. Honestly, I do end up using this guy as counter pretty frequently because there's generally only once or twice in the game that you're going to need that ability, but it's super helpful when you need it to have that in hand. Next up, we are running 3 copies of the 4-cost Kuzan. Yeah, this card is just, again, Navy staple, searchable by brand new, draws you a card, and one swinging can minus one of your opponent's characters by 4. You can also use him more liberally in this deck because, again, your leader can restand him at the end of the turn. So you can, play him, minus, attack, minus things by 4, play Kobe, play X-Drake, kill those things, and then restand him at the end of the turn if you want to keep him alive, so that you can use him for your opponent's big boss monsters. Next up, we are running 2 copies of 5-cost Garp. Again, this guy can kill 4 costs, so just like X-Drake with 1 Dawn underneath your leader, he can kill 5 costs. Garp has always been, to me, kind of a bad card, honestly. Sakazuki has always just been the better choice, in my opinion, and literally every other black leader. But with Issho, I feel it's different, because here, Garp is actually capable of killing 5 costs, just like Sakazuki is. We just have to put 1 Dawn underneath leader. And then at the end of the turn, the one big disadvantage of Garp is that you have to trash a card from hand and rest the character in order to KO the opponent's character. The cool thing is you can actually just restand Garp. So if you're afraid of your opponent killing him on their turn, you can actually just restand your Garp so that they can't attack him. And then you can feel free to use him as an attacker the following turns, or you can just, the threat is always there. You can always just rest him again, discard another card, KO something that you need to KO. Really, really valuable card. I think it earns its spot in this deck. I was playing it at 3, but I dropped it down to 2 to raise the count of another card, and I'll show that pretty soon here. And here we are running the 5-cost Blocker Law. This is an MVP card of the deck. Super, super awesome. It is not Navy, but it is Supernova. So while you can't search it, it does get buffed by the 4-cost X-Drake, which is really nice. So just Dawnless 7k swings, really, really nice. And the awesome thing about this is that you can play Kobe off of the Law. So you can actually, again, this is why I mentioned it's so important to have something to play on your first turn. If you're going second, you want to drop brand new or Rosinante, and then your second turn, you want to drop one of your 4-costs like Kuzan, Borsellino, or X-Drake, and then your third turn, you want to ideally play Law, bounce your brand new or your Rosinante back to hand, and play a Kobe, which will then kill one of your opponent's 3-cost or 4-cost units. And then you have him on board, you have the Kobe on board, and if you had the X-Drake second turn, I mean, that's a lot of swings coming in on your opponent the following turn. On your 4th turn, you are going to come in with like 3 7k swings, a 5k swing off the Kobe. It's just a fantastic card. It's also really useful in a situation where you just need to shore up and drop more blockers. You can easily play the Law, bounce the brand new, and drop the Rosinante, so that you just got 2 blockers for 5 Dawn. You can also just replay the brand new and search again. Being able to recycle your searches is never a bad thing either. So, I mean, obviously you have to read the situation, adapt to whatever it calls for, but Blocker Law is a fantastic, fantastic card in this deck. I think he is definitely one of the key, I would say the cornerstones of this deck. Really, really makes everything work together. And the final unit, the final offensive unit we're playing is 7-cost Kid. I know you haven't seen this guy since 2022. I know nobody's really playing this character, but I think it really just works in this deck, man. A 7-cost Supernova, so again, it gets buffed by X-Drake, and it can restand himself with just 1 Dawn on him at the end of every turn. Dawn times 1, end of your turn, set this card as active. So basically what the leader ability does, this card just does it for free. And that's really the whole identity of this deck, is restand Shenanigans. You want to be able to attack with your units, restand the units so your opponent's forced to swing at life instead of characters, gain that hand advantage, and then when you're down to like 1 life, you start dropping just a ton of blockers and your opponent simply can't get through them. And then you're able to swing with those blockers and then restand them so that they can still block on your opponent's turn. You can restand Borsalino, restand Law, and then 7-cost Kid will restand itself. And having blockers who have higher stat lines than your leader is really nice, because you can always just block and then dump counters on top of that. You're essentially getting at least a 1k counter for free off of these two, or a 2k counter for free off of Kid. And to kind of complement that strategy for events, we are running 4 copies of Spiderweb. This is just Paradise Waterfall on steroids. With 2 Dawn, you can make one of your leaders or characters gain up to 4,000 for the battle, and then you can set a character as active. This is just super, super nice. If your opponent is getting really aggressive, going for 9k swings, you can take one of your 6k blockers like Law or Borsalino, you can block for 6k and then use a Spiderweb to raise them to 10k and then restand the blocker. So you basically just block that for free. Rather you got to block it and then keep your blocker alive. So having again these blockers with these stat lines that are higher than our own leader is really great with Spiderweb, because we can just block, restand, and then keep the blocker alive for future hits, which is really, really good. It's especially great with the 7-cost Kid. I mean, there's so little that can get over that. And lastly, for the deck, nothing exciting here. We're just running some 2k counters, Suru, searchable, 2k, Tashigi, again, searchable 2k counter. And then lastly, we are running 4 copies of Issho. Just a quick word about these 2k counters. In this meta, some people are playing 5-cost vanillas, like, for example, if you're playing against a yellow player, they might drop Randolph, or just 5 costs in general. On your opponent's turn, if your opponent's going first on their 5 Dawn turn, they might drop a 5-cost unit. A really nice play is on your turn, you can drop Suru on your 6 Dawn turn, play Suru for 1. You can minus that 5 cost by 2, make it a 3 cost, and then you can spend your remaining 5 Dawn to play the blocker Law, recall the Suru to hand, and then play a Kobe off of the Law's effect to kill that 5 cost that they just played. So if your opponent is going first and they use their 5 Dawn turn to just drop a 5-drop unit, you can punish them really hard the next turn by just going Suru into Law into Kobe and just undoing their entire last turn, basically. Really, really feels nice. And then the other, Tashigi, of course, also usable. You can -2 with her. She's just a little more expensive. Technically, she does rest herself to minus, so you could rest Tashigi minus something and then use leader ability to restand Tashigi, but it's honestly not that great in practice. I've done it a couple times, but generally, read the situation, but generally, that's not really an optimal move. One thing that has won me so many games is the Issho. The Issho is fantastic because Issho can rest a 4 cost, but again, with a Dawn underneath our leader, she can rest a 5 cost. So if your opponent is relying on a 5 cost blocker like Queen, like Sabo, you can actually just put 1 Dawn on your leader, minus that unit, and then play the Issho for 3, rest that unit and go for game. There's so many times against a Rebecca where they've had just 1 life left or 2 life left, or against a green-purple Dofi where it's been a similar situation. Being able to rest that 5 cost blocker off of the Issho is just phenomenal. It's something that they generally don't expect, and it allows you to just push for game during those lethal turns. All right, guys, just some closing remarks about Issho, about matchups and that sort of thing before we wrap up the video. I think, honestly, Issho is a much better leader than people give him credit for. I actually have great matchups into Rebecca and Dofi. Rebecca, usually I'm able to outgrind, funny enough. They'll have more units on the board by the end of the game, but they'll have very little life. And generally, I'm able to just play that Issho, like I said, rest their Sabo or whatever other blocker they're relying on, and just push for game. And then against Doflamingo, the 7 cost kid is the absolute MVP of that matchup. Being able to swing with him and restand him every turn just keeps pushing them away from lethal, and then you can use him to take out their bigger units. Yellow is kind of a tough matchup depending on how high rolly their triggers are, but generally this deck goes so wide. Again, you kind of saw the list. We go for a lot of mid-range units, and then especially with the starter deck X-Drake, we're threatening a lot of really big swings with these sort of middle cost units. That generally 10 cost Mom is a very punishable move. So against yellow, I'm not saying it's a great matchup, but their biggest tool, which is 10 cost Mom, is usually going to lose them the game. And so I find that this deck actually has a decent matchup into yellow. Mono blue is definitely the toughest matchup. Croc absolutely annihilates this deck. Really, really tough matchup there. But Whitebeard even, generally, it's not so bad. I've found it to be about a 50-50, especially with the X-Drake. Again, all of your 5k units are going to swing 6k. So suddenly you can pump out a lot of swings at leader and still develop board without having to use up your Dawn for those swings. So it's really, really nice. Against Whitebeard, I actually have found that this deck does pretty well. So generally, I mean, Issho, he is an off-meta leader, but he has pretty good matchups into most of the meta. So I think, it's a deck that takes a lot of, it takes some skill to master. It is a little wonky. You have to get used to piloting it. But once you do put in that time, it is going to reward you for sure. And you'll be able to take down a lot of different leaders in the game. All right, guys. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a good time playing this deck. Definitely try it out. Leave some comments down below. Let me know how you like it. And we will see you in the next video. Peace.